Okay, so here we are in a Skype interview with Donald Lindsay. We're just he's helping us with our Points Along the Way series that we're doing on the blog, just basically outlining some points in bagpipe history. So we're going to start with, I think we're going to talk a little bit today about, when the Romans arrived in Scotland and, maybe a little bit before and a little bit after, but what effect that had on the development of the instrument. So Donald, if you want to fire away.
Okay, Andrew, in this topic there's some factual basis to support some of these ideas, and some of this is pure speculation. One of the biggest problems is that the Scots, the Picts, the Britons didn't write a whole lot down about these ancient times, but based on the finding of artifacts, various ones, archaeologists and anthropologists and historians can begin to try to put together a rough picture. Consider the fact that in early Scotland there were various cultures, the ones I just mentioned, the Picts, and the Celts came eventually, and the Scots came across from Northern Ireland via the Southern Hebrides. And so that was the name of the environment. That's what it was like. It was separate cultures with separate leaderships. The Romans wanted to make a province of Britain, of course, and they made their way from southern Britain up to Scotland in a series of invasions, battles, and attacks. For the Romans, unfortunately, when they got to the higher ground, when they got to the mountain ranges in central Scotland, they began to encounter difficulty. It was costing a lot of money to maintain armies, and the fighting was not the kind of fighting they were used to. So ultimately, Hadrian made his famous wall, the hope being to keep the inhabitants of the north of Scotland away from the Roman settlements. And eventually, the Scots particularly attacked some of these settlements. Around about the 4th century AD, the Celts made their way across Europe and appeared on the scene, probably in several waves. And eventually the Britons came up from the Romano-Celtic world further south. So the Romans were known for their instrument called the tibia, which was a bagpipe made from the shin bone from cattle, taken from cattle, and presumably they had a single or double reed in this, I don't know, and drilled finger holes, and it was a pretty accepted part of Roman culture about that time. It's highly likely that one of the influences that brought the bagpipe into being in Scotland was the Roman invasions, because it's likely that they carried these instruments with them, and even if there were instruments in existence in Scotland at this time, it's very likely that the players of both would be comparing notes. It happens today when we encounter any new form of bagpipe. People are interested in finding out how it works, and take for example the Uilleann pipe. Highland pipers frequently will mimic the style of playing of the Uilleann pipers.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, there's also the intermingling I'm seeing a lot more of in between the Breton music and the traditional sort of Scottish competitive music. There's the fellow from Breton that's playing with Simon Fraser University now, and there's also, the Toronto Police in Ontario are starting to, explore the French styles and stuff like that.
Yes, this seems to be an ongoing interest of pipers. See what other pipers do. And when you mention the Breton pipers, they're quite ancient. They have an ancient background in piping, and it's manifested itself in the modern day with them playing what we call Highland bagpipe. but they also play the bombard and the binu, among other bagpipe-like instruments. And so here's the point I would try to make about the pipes in Scotland. The more I look into this, the more I believe that bagpipes in various forms were evolving throughout Europe, Eastern Europe, probably Asia, probably North Africa, as well as Britain. And it's very likely that a lot of these forms of instruments were carried in migrations across Europe and ultimately into Britain and ultimately into Scotland and Ireland. The evidence of this is that virtually every European country has various forms of bagpipe in its history. Some have dwindled away and disappeared and now are just museum pieces, but some are still actively played. And you're right, Andrew, it's Brittany. That seems to be the hot spot as far as really supporting and maintaining this culture and interest. Galicia is another place. Asturias is another place in Spain. But there are bagpipes in Greece, in Italy as well. And some of the northern forms from the Scandinavian countries and from Holland and those places are more associated now with the Middle Ages. We're not seeing as much of those. So it's probable by the time the Romans did appear in Scotland that there were forms of the bagpipe, early forms. And there was probably some interchanging of ideas and techniques from one player to another. Now, you might say that could be a middle chapter in piping because archaeologists maintain that there was a bagpipe in Babylonia in 2800 BC. And there are Phoenician carvings of women playing the pipes in the 8th and 6th centuries BC. In the Canterbury Tales of 1300 and 1400, we see the miller carrying a set of bagpipes. So the bagpipe most likely was not at all unique to Scotland, but what's interesting about the bagpipe is that in Scotland the clans integrated it into the deepest parts of their culture. And that's probably one of the reasons why there's such a rich history of piping and rich repertoire of pipe music, ancient and modern, both.
Great. Well, I think that's all the time we have for now, but I think that's really good insight into, the basics of the Romans showing up in Scotland and how that had a part to play in the development of the instrument as we know it today. So thanks very much for contributing your thoughts there.
Thanks for asking me, Andrew. I enjoyed it.